What's up guys? Seeing as I've been making videos for a while now, I thought it felt like the right time to contribute to the time-honored tradition that many other YouTube creators have been doing for years now, making videos that no one wants to watch. Although it's arguable that I've been doing that for a long time now. So since I'm a trash weeaboo, my favorite game series of all time has to be Final Fantasy. So I thought maybe it'd be fun to rank each of the game's logos from my least favorite all the way through to my favorite. This isn't a list about which game is my favorite, just taking the logo by itself and judging it in whatever arbitrary way that comes to my mind. Alright, let's do this.
15th place.
Final Fantasy V. You know, it's kind of a shame that a game with so much personality and such a great sense of humor has the most cliche and boring logo in the series. The soft color palette on the dragon that has sort of this weirdly sensual glance going on over its left shoulder makes me feel like I'm looking at the precursor of the brony culture or something. And look at the way it's coiling its tail gently around the A. It just makes me uncomfortable, like it'd touch me inappropriately after I fell asleep at its house or something. I guess it takes some talent to turn a dragon into something so totally non-threatening, but Final Fantasy V's logo does just that. Last place.
14th place.
Final Fantasy IX. Is Final Fantasy IX the best game in the series? Lots of people would say that. Lots of people are wrong about things too. For legal purposes, I am obligated to say that these two parties do not necessarily consist of the same people, but regardless of how you feel, the game's logo is pretty underwhelming. The soft yellow glow is kind of reminiscent of urine-stained bed sheets or something, and the dinky little crystal in the middle looks like it's trying its hardest to hide itself so no one sees that it wet itself last night. I think its biggest issue is that it's the smallest logo, and that's maybe part of the reason why it leaves so little impact. Plus, crystals are just above dragons and names with too many apostrophes in the list of overplayed cliches in fantasy entertainment. The concept logo is easily better, which makes me think that when the game sleeve was printed, they used the worst one by mistake and just said screw it, good enough. 14th place goes to Final Fantasy IX.
13th place.
Final Fantasy II. Yoshitaka Amano's art, especially for the Final Fantasy logos, usually has a great sense of implied motion, and even though they sometimes initially come off as kind of coarse and sketched, there's always a deep sense of polish and beauty. Final Fantasy II's logo doesn't have either of those things. It really just looks like an early draft to me, and everyone at Squaresoft was just kind of like, yeah, that's great. And Amano left the building confused, but pretty happy that he only had to put 5 minutes in at the office that day. And it doesn't do the Emperor any justice at all, being the main antagonist of the game and probably the most interesting character too. This dude's so rad that he went to hell and then he came back out like nothing happened. In fact, it just made him stronger.
12th place.
Final Fantasy XI. Final Fantasy logos usually opt for a more singular focal point, and while 11's move away from that idea doesn't make it inherently bad, they took it a little too far in the other direction in my opinion. The motion in the color that swells kind of like a wave towards the middle is pretty cool imagery, like the Tides of War clashing in the climactic battle of the Great Crystal War, and I like the small group banded together in the middle, reflecting the idea that it's a multiplayer experience, but it quickly crumbles into a cluttered mess to either side. It's supposed to be centered around each of the 5 playable races in the game, but my eyes are always pulled away from them and more towards like the bird or the clump of weapons off to the left and stuff. Amano described his experience of drawing it as being tedious and his most challenging, and I think it shows, in good ways and bad. While it's a pretty cool work of art on its own, it just seems a little too busy to serve as the logo to me.
11th place.
Final Fantasy VI. Dude, this one's so close to being awesome. The harsh red and black color scheme paired with a profile view of the Magitech armor sounds perfect on paper, but Amano's relatively simple art style just isn't that great of a match with all the small details of the machine, and it just looks a little blotchy and inky and stuff. It's a little too small too, and kind of awkwardly squeezed into the middle of the text where there isn't quite enough space to show itself off properly. But it still makes for a pretty sweet silhouette, and what I think saves it is having Terra on top wielding her sword with what looks like some serious killer intent. The logo feels sinister, and it matches the mood of the game pretty well. The human element meshed together with the bulky Magitech armor just barely misses its mark in my opinion, but it still works well enough to look pretty good. 11th place goes to Final Fantasy VI.
10th place.
Final Fantasy I. You're probably asking me right now, hey, what's the difference between this logo and Final Fantasy II's? Well, I can't hear you, idiot. But here's the answer anyways, though. Where 2's is static, this one is a little more dynamic. Look at the fire that's in this guy's eye. Like, you can sense that he just got done ripping the throat out of some unfortunate bad guy. Now he's turning your way as if to say, hey, you want some too, yeah, that's what I thought. There's danger and confidence behind his stance and eyes, and the overall design works great with just enough detail to keep my eyes flowing over it comfortably. It still looks just a little bit thin and wispy and empty or something, like it wasn't quite filled out all the way, which makes it not my favorite, but I still think it's better than the ones I talked about before. Those horns too, very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool.
10th place goes to Final Fantasy 1.
9th place.
Final Fantasy 3. This is just pretty much an upgrade on the first game's logo, I think. It's got cool colors, cool implied movement, and a super cool two-sword style weapon wielding that gets my inner nerd breathing laboriously. I love the flowing V shape that wedges itself down in between the two words, and the way it looks like the dude's just flying straight out at us, like he's the embodiment of wind or whatever. I sound like an anime right now. I better cut this one short before I embarrass myself. 9th place goes to Final Fantasy 3.
8th place.
Final Fantasy XIV. This is basically just the third Final Fantasy logo on steroids. A bunch of dudes and ladies looking sick and ready to do some reasonably paced battle, while letting their moves cool down before they continue to deal damage at a rate which I can only describe as being moderate. This is probably my favorite use of coloring in any of the logos though, and I like it a lot more than the one they used for the relaunch of A Realm Reborn. Lots of great movement going on too. Cool details that don't take away from the central point of focus, and a cool little thing where all the heroes of Light are all packed together like they're all party members, but all flaying out in every which direction, showing that all kinds of playstyles and decisions could be made to take you wherever you want to go in the game. Wow, so deep. 8th place goes to Final Fantasy XIV.
7th place.
Final Fantasy VIII. It's rare that you see a game's logo double as a spoiler for the story, but Final Fantasy VIII never played by anyone else's rules, I guess you could say. It likes to think of itself as being a black sheep in the Final Fantasy family, which is rich coming from a game whose logo is the most cliche and saccharine artsy shot of a couple hugging at sunset. Still, I love how the design seems to swirl in and out of itself like the yin-yang of love and teenage angst. Good sense of movement and passion too. The two bodies kind of melding and fading away to where you can't really tell where one ends and the other begins. I'm a sucker for love stories, and I think the logo does a pretty good job of indicating what we're getting ourselves into.
6th place.
Final Fantasy VII. I like this logo a lot because it reminds me of those cool science fiction book covers that show a bunch of sweet stuff way off in the distance, paled by the atmosphere but massive and moving fast and stuff. It's on the simple side, and I actually kind of like a lot of the alternate designs that were made for it instead of the one they actually used. Some of the added color gives it more impact, but the one they used is kind of pleasant, which is paradoxical because getting railed by a comet and dying is the opposite of pleasant. It's terrifying. It would be a kind of a cool way to die though. Anyways, the materia kind of floating up to the top right of it, which I'm gonna guess is holy, is a pretty cool detail that kind of shows how small the resistance is and how massive the threat in the game is. And I like how they made the end of the meteor tail a dark black, like it's coming in from outer space. I don't know, I just really like it despite it being pretty simplistic. 6th place goes to Final Fantasy VII.
5th place.
Final Fantasy XIII. Gosh dang beautiful. Not much more to say about it than that. I noticed that it's the only logo that's off the center and to the right, at least in the main numbered series. I didn't look at any of the other spin-offs or anything. I've actually never played this game, so I don't really know what any of this is supposed to mean, but I like how it can look so active, but also so still at the same time. Nice colors too. Looks like it was maybe inspired by the ocean or something, I don't know, like Mother of Pearl or Abalone Shell or something like that. Not sure if it has any bearing on the game itself, but it's cool looking enough to make me seriously consider playing it. If anyone's got any good reasons why I should or shouldn't, let me know in the comments, I guess. It kind of looks like two people are sleeping on top of a flammy looking dragon from Secret of Mana or something. I don't know, it just looks nice. And the text being bordered by that teal color adds a lot to the personality of the logo too. I don't really have much more to say about it than that. It just looks beautiful. I'd probably hang a poster of this on my wall and not even be afraid of letting girls see it.
4th place.
Final Fantasy 15. So there's a reason I can't really get into why I like this logo so much, but I guess you gotta just kind of trust me when I say that there's a lot more to it than what you can see initially at first. But even at a first glance, you can see how beautiful this logo is laid out. It's dark and mysterious, but also almost comfortable looking. Just a cool little juxtaposition between dark and light, balancing it from the sun on the top left with the words cutting it in half and it trailing off at the ends of the dress in black. And I love how the words are cradled by the sleeping figure too. Everything just looks so peaceful and taken care of. I really like when the Final Fantasy logos make use of a darker set of colors, and the lighting looks so natural, seeping through the tips of the fabric, and how every element of the picture leads the eye back to the central details. It's pretty sweet. 4th place goes to Final Fantasy 15.
3rd place.
Final Fantasy 12. This logo just looks super threatening, like it's ready to just crush the absolute dicks out of whatever gets in its way. What really brings it together though is the big ol' calligraphy stroke down the right side. There's just a kind of traditional beauty paired with a wild and kinetic kind of energy that's charged throughout everything that's going on here. And the judge's power stance as he holds each of his massive swords out to either side of himself makes him look like a rock star that knows he's about to rip a solo so hard it'll melt your face in half and musically pound you in the dick. Except the judge is probably just getting prepped to cleave a body clean in two with one ferocious swing of his blade instead of play the guitar. Here's a guy that doesn't have to do the nothing personnel, kid, by transporting behind you and killing you. He'll probably just calmly walk right up to you and kill you while looking you directly in the eyes. Everything about 12's logo is just strong and beautiful. It's perfect. 3rd place goes to Final Fantasy 12.
2nd place.
Final Fantasy IV. So if we were talking about the alternate logo that came out with the DS release, Final Fantasy IV has pretty much hands down the best logo. But if we're talking about the original, it's still so good. I'm not even sure why I like it so much. I'm not even that big a fan of the game, which I know is sacrilege in the Final Fantasy community, but the original logo just denotes so much emotion in such a simple image. The downcast expression of Kain and his lower half fading out to nothing, it just says so much without having to do too much, you know? I like how his pose maybe indicates that he's jumping up into the air like dragoons often do, but looks so casual and thoughtful. I don't know, it's provocative. Gets the people going, you know? But seriously, just look at the DS alternate. This is the best logo, I don't even care. It gives off such a heavy feeling of impending destruction and unstoppable death. He looks like he's just about to literally crush the sun with his bare hand, and looking at this image makes me believe that he can, and he probably will. It's my real fake favorite Final Fantasy logo. Anyways, 2nd place goes to Final Fantasy IV, the original one.
1st place.
Final Fantasy X. This is it. It's the best of them all. I can't get around it. I don't even like this game, but even I have to admit that this logo is absolutely incredible. Look at how much movement there is in this. You can almost see the water flowing and Yuna dancing on it. There's a perfect balance of color and framing and symmetry and the gradual slope upwards from the left to the right. It's got it all, man. I tell you, it's got it all. It's captivating, and it keeps your eyes circling from the start to the finish and back to the start again, and over and over and over again. There's just so much tumultuous energy going on, but it looks so calming and peaceful too. It's just so good. And just off screen, if you listen closely, you can faintly hear Tidus blaming every single minor inconvenience in his life on his old man. Do you think Tidus accidentally calls out to his old man when making love to Yuna? I do. And that's the video. See ya. Thanks for watching.